Callie Preston hadn't meant to ruin anyone's lunch, especially not a stranger's, but somehow, her chicken Caesar wrap ended up in front of a man in a tailored navy suit who clearly hadn't ordered it. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, cheeks flushing as she reached across the small bistro table to reclaim the plate. "I didn't mean this was supposed to go to table 6. I'm at table 6. You're not." The man looked up from his phone, one brow raised, and for a second, Callie forgot how to breathe. He was gorgeous, not in a pretty boy, too perfect kind of way, but sharp, magnetic. His jawline could cut glass, and his dark hair was pushed back like he hadn't tried too hard but still looked unfairly good. His suit probably cost more than her rent. He picked up the wrap, placed it gently back on the tray she was holding, and smiled. "Well, I was wondering when my diet started including lettuce and grilled chicken." His voice was deep, smooth, and warm in a way that didn't match the cold, intimidating air of the rest of him. The smile, though, it was real, it hit like sunshine. Callie laughed, nervous and flustered. "I swear I'm not trying to convert strangers to healthy eating, I hate confrontation, so I figured I'd deliver my own food." "You hate confrontation, but you walked right up to a stranger and took food off his table," she winced. "Okay, when you say it like that." He tilted his head, studying her. "You always this bold with strangers?" "No," she said quickly. "Today's just weird." The waitress rushed over, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry, sir, ma'am, there was a mix-up with the table numbers." Callie smiled at her. "It's not your fault." "I should have waited for you." "It's fine," the man said, waving her off. "I got a smile out of it, worth it." Callie looked down, heart thudding. "Well, enjoy your actual lunch." She turned to head back to her table, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She glanced back. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "You're eating alone," she nodded. "So am I. Join me." Callie blinked. "What?" "Sit. Share your lettuce wrap. I'll order something else and pretend I'm not offended." She hesitated, then lowered her tray to the table, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm Callie," she said. "Jacob," he replied, offering his hand. "Jacob Monroe." His grip was warm, firm, her stomach flipped. "So, Callie Preston," he said, settling back in his chair, "what do you do when you're not accidentally stealing food from strangers?" She laughed again, shaking her head. "I run a little art studio down the street. We do classes, paint and wine nights, that kind of thing." Jacob nodded slowly. "So you're creative?" "I try to be, and brave, apparently." "You walked right up, took control. You're not like most people I meet." She raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment or—" "It's definitely a compliment," she smiled, brushing hair behind her ear. "What about you?" "What do you do?" He paused just for a second. "Business stuff. Boring. Nothing as fun as art studios." She narrowed her eyes. "That's vague, is it?" "Very," he grinned. "Maybe I'm just trying to keep a little mystery alive." She laughed. "Mystery man in a suit." "Got it." Their food arrived this time, the right orders. As they ate, conversation flowed like they'd known each other longer than 20 minutes. He was charming, quick-witted, but also quietly observant. He asked about her studio, her favorite kind of art, what her childhood was like. He didn't talk about himself much, but when he did, there were mentions of travel, meetings, managing people that suggested he wasn't just some average office guy. Still, no red flags, no arrogance, just curiosity and that smile. "I can't believe I'm saying this," she said 2 hours later, pushing her plate away, "but that was the best wrong order of my life." Jacob leaned forward. "So what happens now?" She blinked. "What? Do you go back to work and I go back to pretending I like boardrooms and we never see each other again?" She hesitated. "I mean, that's usually how random lunches go." "I don't do usual." His phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. "Come to dinner with me." Callie blinked. "Tonight? There's a rooftop place in Midtown, great view, even better dessert." She hesitated. "You don't even know if I'm a serial killer. I'm willing to take my chances." She bit her lip, heart racing. "Okay, yes." His smile widened. "I'll pick you up. I can meet you there." "No," he said, standing. "I'll pick you up." That night, he arrived in a black town car, stepping out dressed in another suit, this one charcoal, crisp, perfect. He opened the door for her like a gentleman, and when she stepped in, she could already smell the faint cologne that somehow made her dizzy. The restaurant was on the 34th floor of a glass building with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city lights. The table was set with candles. The waiter greeted Jacob by name. Callie blinked. "You come here a lot, now and then." The waiter poured wine without asking. Jacob ordered the chef's tasting menu. She didn't even see a bill. Halfway through dinner, she leaned in. "Okay, I give up." "Who are you?" He looked at her, quiet for a beat. "I own a few companies," he said finally. "Real estate, tech, some finance." She frowned. "A few," he sighed. "I'm a billionaire." Callie, she blinked at him. "I didn't want to lead with it," he added quickly. "People usually treat me different once they know." "Well," she said, swirling her wine, "I did steal your lunch, so I think we're past that." He grinned. "You're not running?" "No." "Why?" She met his eyes. "Because I like you." His expression shifted, surprised, then something else. Warmer. "Deeper, I like you too," he said. "A lot more than I should after one day." Callie's heart thudded. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, his hand brushed hers across the table. Everything about it felt like the start of something big. And neither of them had any idea just how fast they were about to fall. Callie hadn't expected a second date to come with a driver in a navy suit, opening the door of a sleek silver car like she was someone important. She also hadn't expected the destination to be a private gallery in Tribeca, where the security guard greeted Jacob with a nod and unlocked the door to let them in after hours. "Tell me this isn't your gallery," she said as they stepped in. "It's not," Jacob replied, adjusting the cuff of his dark coat, "but the owner owes me a favor." The lights flickered on overhead, revealing a long corridor of modern sculptures and large, moody canvases. The space was silent except for the soft echo of their footsteps. "Why are we here?" she asked, glancing around at the empty space. Jacob turned to her. "Because you said you love art. And I wanted you to see this collection before it opens to the public next week." Callie stepped closer to one of the pieces, a massive mixed-media collage layered with broken mirror fragments and newspaper clippings. "How do you even know the owner?" He studied her as she examined the work. "We invested in one of his projects a few years ago. He's brilliant but not great with budgets." Callie tilted her head. "So you bailed him out." "I gave him room to breathe. He paid me back in his own way." She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "You do that often?" "What? Help people without asking for the spotlight?" Jacob gave a quiet shrug. "I don't need people to know everything I do." She walked further into the gallery, pausing in front of a painting that looked like a city skyline melting into water. "You're not what I expected. You expected someone arrogant, flashy. I expected someone who'd make me feel small." He stepped beside her, voice low. "Do you?" "No," she said softly. "That's what surprises me." He let the silence settle between them before gently taking her hand. She didn't pull away. "You're not just beautiful," he said. "You're grounded, real. Most people I meet want something from me. You didn't ask for anything." "You stole my table," she reminded him with a faint grin. "And I'm grateful for it." As they wandered deeper into the gallery, Callie paused in front of a piece with bold, sweeping brushstrokes in deep reds and blacks. "This one feels like a storm." Jacob looked at it, then at her. "You see things differently." "I teach people to express what they can't say out loud," she said. "Sometimes it makes you look at everything else in a new way." He watched her for a long moment. "Do you ever paint?" She hesitated. "Not for a long time." "Why not?" Callie crossed her arms, eyes still on the canvas. "Because the last time I did, I poured everything into it, and then someone told me it wasn't good enough." "Someone who mattered?" "Yes." Jacob's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't press. "You ever think of trying again?" "Sometimes." She turned to him. "But it's easier to help others do it." He studied her face. "I'd like to see your work." "You'd have to earn that." His gaze didn't waver. "Then tell me what it takes." Callie didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the next piece. After they left the gallery, he didn't take her straight home. Instead, he directed the driver to a quiet bridge that overlooked the skyline, the buildings glittering like 1,000 stories stacked on top of one another. They stood against the railing, the air crisp around them. "I can't tell if you're trying to impress me or confuse me," she said, arms folded against the chill. "Neither," Jacob replied. "I just want to know what happens when you stop expecting the worst." She looked at him. You think I expect the worst. I think people who have been disappointed too many times stop believing something better could be real. Callie turned her face toward the wind. What about you? I don't expect anything anymore, he said. Everything's a transaction. Everyone has a price. And what am I, Jacob? He looked at her then, the city reflecting in his eyes. You're the first question I've asked in a long time that I don't already know the answer to. She didn't respond, but something shifted between them in that moment, something real. The next day, he showed up outside her studio during her lunch break, dressed in jeans and a gray jacket this time, no driver in sight. You're not in a suit, she noted as she stepped outside. I thought I'd try blending in. Callie narrowed her eyes. What do you want? He held out a small, wrapped box without ceremony. I saw something that reminded me of you. She hesitated, then took it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a delicate silver necklace shaped like a paintbrush. Her voice caught. How did you mentioned your students. One of them made it. I bought it from her after her class yesterday. You came to my studio. I watched from the hallway. You were in your element. I didn't want to interrupt. Callie stared at the necklace, her hand trembling slightly. You didn't have to do this. I didn't have to ask you to dinner either, he said, but I did. She looked up at him. Why are you doing all this? Because you're not like anyone I've ever met, and I think if I don't find out where this goes, I'll regret it. Her breath caught in her throat. I don't know if I can give you what you're used to. I don't want what I'm used to. Before she could respond, a group of kids burst out of the studio behind her, laughing and shouting. One of them waved at her. That's my cue, she said. He nodded. I'll wait. I have 2 more classes. I'll still be here. Callie hesitated, then turned and went inside. When she looked back through the window 10 minutes later, Jacob was still standing across the street, hands in his pockets, watching the door like something important was behind it. And for the first time in years, something inside her cracked open just enough to let in the possibility of more. The next week moved like quicksilver, a blur of days charged with expectation and moments that lingered long after they passed. Callie found herself slipping into a rhythm she hadn't known. She'd been missing days at the studio filled with color and laughter, and evenings spent in places she never imagined she'd belong. Jacob didn't ask for permission to become a part of her life, he simply showed up. Not overbearing, never demanding, just there. Like clockwork, he'd appear after her last class, leaning against the brick wall with his sleeves rolled up and a quiet energy that made her pulse stutter. One night, it was a jazz club tucked beneath an old hotel where they drank smoky cocktails and shared secrets over the hum of a saxophone. Another time, he brought her to a silent auction at a private estate in the Hudson Valley, where she watched him command a room without saying much at all. But with every new experience, every glance that lingered longer than it should, Callie felt something building inside her. A weight, a question she couldn't ignore. Where do you go when you're not with me? They were sitting on the floor of her studio late one evening, surrounded by canvases and the faint scent of turpentine. He was thumbing through a sketchbook she'd reluctantly handed him, his tie loosened, shoes abandoned by the door. Jacob looked up. Depends on the day, he said, closing the book. Why? Callie brushed paint off her hands with a rag. Because I don't know what your life looks like when I'm not around. It's like you appear out of nowhere, take me somewhere unreal, and then vanish again. You think I'm hiding something? I don't know what I think, she admitted. I just know I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. I have meetings, calls. People who expect me to fix things that are already broken, and sometimes I let them believe I can. That doesn't sound like a life. It's the one I built. She studied him carefully. Do you even like it? I used to. His voice was low. Before I realized, I couldn't remember the last time someone looked at me and didn't see what they could take. Callie didn't look away. I'm not going to be your escape, Jacob. I'm not asking you to be. Then what are we doing? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a pencil from her desk and handed it to her. Draw something right now, she blinked. What? I want to see what you do when you're not thinking, no overanalyzing, no fear. Callie hesitated, then took the pencil, her fingers closing around it slowly. She turned to a fresh page in her pad and began to sketch. Not for him, not to impress, just to feel something move through her again. When she stopped, she looked down at the page. It was a figure, half-formed, standing beneath a sky that bled into shadow, arms outstretched like they had nothing left to lose. Jacob studied it silently. Then he looked at her. "You've been carrying that with you for a long time." She didn't reply. He stood, walked across the room, and came back with a frame from the corner, one she hadn't used in months. He slid the paper into it and set it on the shelf beside her other displays. "You don't get to hide this anymore," he said. "Not from yourself." The next morning, Callie arrived at the studio to find a delivery truck parked outside. Two men were unloading easels, boxes of new brushes, and crates labeled with the name of a high-end art supply company she'd only ever seen in catalogs. She rushed forward. "This has to be a mistake." The driver checked his clipboard. "Callie Preston?" "Yes, but then it's not a mistake." Her phone rang before she could argue. She answered without checking the ID. "You didn't have to do this," she said immediately. Jacob's voice came through the line, calm as ever. "You've got a full waiting list for your classes. You're turning people away because you don't have the materials." "That doesn't sit right with me. I can't afford any of this. That's why I paid for it." She stepped back from the truck, lowering her voice. "You can't just fix things with money." "I didn't fix anything. I just gave you space to do more of what you already do." She closed her eyes. "You don't understand. I've worked hard to build this on my own. I know that, and I'm not trying to take credit for any of it." "Then why do this?" "Because I believe in what you're doing, and because I care about you." She froze. "Callie," he said, quieter now. "I've spent years surrounded by people who only pretend to care. You're not one of them, so if I want to help you grow what you've built, it's not about control, it's about respect." She said nothing for a long time. Then, softly, "What do you want from me?" "Dinner, tonight, no drivers. No reservations, just you and me." She hung up without answering. That evening, she found him waiting outside her apartment building, holding 2 takeout bags and a bottle of wine. He wore jeans and a faded hoodie, and for the first time, he looked like someone she might have met in another life. A simpler one. They sat on her fire escape as the city buzzed below, eating noodles from paper cartons and sipping wine from chipped mugs. No grand gestures, no velvet ropes, just 2 people trying to figure out what happened when something real slipped past their defenses. Callie leaned back against the railing, watching the skyline. "Do you ever think about what you'd do if you weren't you?" she asked. "Every day. And I'd still want to be with you." Her heart thudded harder, but she didn't look at him. "Even if none of this lasts, especially then." She turned to face him. "You're not used to hearing no, are you?" He shook his head. "Only from you." And when he kissed her, it wasn't careful or calculated. It was raw and unguarded, full of questions neither of them could answer yet. But for the first time, Callie didn't feel like she was falling alone. The invitation came unexpectedly. A thick, ivory envelope slipped beneath the studio door just after Callie finished locking up for the night. Her name was inked in elegant script across the front. No return address. Inside was a single card printed with the words, "Come find out what happens when a man falls in love with a smile. Tonight. 8 o'clock, the rooftop at Gramercy and 5th." She turned the card over, blank, no signature, but she didn't need one. Callie stood at the edge of the rooftop garden, her breath catching as the city glittered around her. Strings of golden lights dipped between wrought iron arches, casting soft halos over a linen-covered table set for 2. A string quartet played something low and haunting near the far wall. Every detail was thoughtful, precise, yet none of it felt like a performance. She spotted him near the railing in a dark jacket that moved with the wind, his hands tucked into his pockets as he watched the skyline. "You sent an invitation," she said as she approached, voice quiet. Jacob turned. "I figured you deserved something more than a text." "Why tonight?" "Because I've been carrying something too long, and if I don't say it now, I might lose the chance to say it at all." She stepped closer. "Say what?" He looked at her, and for once, the usual cool confidence in his eyes had faded, replaced by something stripped down and raw. "That I love you, not because you're different or artistic or because you make me forget the world I live in, but because the moment you looked at me like I wasn't a name or a number, I knew I'd never be the same again." Callie's heart thudded once, hard. You don't fall in love that fast. I didn't. I fell the moment you walked up to me holding a tray and said you hated confrontation, but still took your food back anyway. She laughed under her breath. And then I kept falling, he said. Every time you challenged me. Every time you showed me something real when I didn't know I needed it. Callie pressed a hand to her stomach, willing the storm inside to settle. I don't know how to do your world, Jacob. I don't know how to be the person who walks into rooms like the ones you live in and doesn't question if she belongs there. I don't need you to be different, he said. I need you to be exactly who you already are. Because everything I've built, every dollar, every deal, none of it matters if I can't come home and see that smile again. She blinked fast. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin box. This isn't a proposal, he said. Not yet. But it's something I should have given you the night I saw your first sketch. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold pendant, shaped like the skyline she once drew beneath a bleeding sky. I had it made by the same girl who crafted the paintbrush charm. I figured you'd want something you created, not something I picked. Callie reached for it slowly, fingertips brushing the delicate chain. You remembered every line. I remember everything you show me, he said. Even the things you think I don't. She looked up at him. I was terrified of you. Of what it meant to feel this much. I was terrified too, he said, because the moment I met you, I stopped being in control. There was a long silence then, broken only by the distant sound of the quartet and the hum of the city below. Then Callie stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face to his chest. I don't want to be afraid anymore, she whispered. His arms came around her, strong and steady. Then don't be. She pulled back just enough to look up at him. I'm not used to this kind of ending. Jacob leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. Maybe it's not an ending. Maybe it's just where everything finally starts to make sense. The next morning, Callie walked into her studio to find a line of new students waiting outside, some familiar, others clearly new. The supplies Jacob had gifted sat neatly organized along the back wall, untouched but ready. She opened the doors, heart full in a way it had never been before. Later that afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up across the street, and Jacob stepped out, not in a suit, but in rolled sleeves and worn leather shoes, holding a thermos in one hand and a bag of pastries in the other. You brought bribes, she asked, smiling as he approached. I brought breakfast, he said. But if you want to call it bribery, I won't argue. She let him in, and the students watched curiously as the billionaire sat cross-legged on the floor, helping a 6-year-old mix colors for her first painting. You're not what I expected, one of the mothers whispered to Callie as she passed. Callie looked over at Jacob, who was laughing at something the little girl said. I know, she replied. He never is. As the class wore on, Jacob stayed until the last child left, then helped her clean up, his hands streaked with paint he didn't bother to wipe off. When they stepped outside, the sun was beginning to set, and the city glowed in amber light. You know, Callie said, you never answered when I asked what happens when you're not with me. He brushed a curl from her cheek. I count the hours until I see you again. And this time she didn't hesitate. She leaned in, kissed him softly, and whispered, I love you too. They stood there, wrapped in the warmth of something permanent, surrounded by the heartbeat of the city that had brought them together. It started with a wrong order. It ended with everything exactly where it was meant to be. 2 months later, Callie nudged open the door to the penthouse with her hip, balancing a stack of canvas boards in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. The scent of fresh lilies hit her first. Jacob had replaced the ones in the foyer vase again. She kicked off her shoes, padded across the gleaming wood floor, and followed the faint sound of classical piano echoing from the far end of the apartment. He was seated at the grand piano facing the windows, shirt sleeves casually rolled, his fingers moving with an easy grace she hadn't seen before. He didn't notice her right away. He rarely did when he played, but the moment she set the canvases on the couch, he looked up. You're early, he said, stopping mid-note. The studio had a plumbing issue. Class had to be canceled, so I figured I'd raid your espresso machine and disrupt your piece. He stood, crossing the room in long strides. You can disrupt anything you want. She tilted her chin. Even your secret chop-in sessions? That was Debussy. He leaned down, brushing a kiss to her temple. But I'll let the insult slide. She laughed, setting the coffee on the side table. You know, I never pictured you playing piano. He walked to the bar and poured a glass of water. My mother made me learn as a kid. I quit when I was 16, then picked it back up during lockdown. It's the only time I can hear myself think. Callie folded her arms, watching him. There's still so much I don't know about you. Jacob raised an eyebrow. Like what? She took a seat on the arm of the couch. Like what you wanted to be before the money, before the boardrooms and investors and mergers. He leaned against the bar, thoughtful. I wanted to be an architect when I was 12. I used to sketch buildings on napkins during dinner. Why didn't you? My father said it wasn't scalable. His mouth twisted slightly. He believed in building portfolios, not buildings. Callie stood and walked over to him. Is that what you want now, scale? No, he said quietly. Now I want permanence, something that doesn't vanish when the market shifts. She took his hand. Then build that. He looked down at their intertwined fingers. I already am. That weekend, Jacob brought her to a low-rise building on the Lower East Side. The exterior was plain weathered brick, faded signage, but inside, the space had been gutted. Exposed beams stretched overhead and sunlight poured in through arched windows that overlooked the narrow street below. Callie turned in a slow circle. What is this place? I bought it last year. It was supposed to be another investment property, but I never got around to developing it. Why are we here? He walked to the far wall and unrolled a large blueprint across a work table. Because I want to turn it into something real, a community arts center, workshops, exhibits. A place where people can create without worrying if they can afford it. She stared at the plans, heart thudding. You're serious? I don't want this to be mine, he said. I want it to be ours. Callie blinked. You're giving me a building. I'm giving us a purpose. Something shifted in her chest, an ache that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with possibility. They spent the next weeks planning the renovation together, arguing over floor tiles, debating layout designs, and laughing more than either of them expected. The building came to life slowly, walls repainted, floors restored, natural light filtering across new studio spaces. One afternoon, as they stood in the freshly painted main hall, Jacob reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I signed over the deed this morning, he said. Half in your name, half in mine. Callie stared at him. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said. Because this is the first thing I've built that feels like it means something. Spring crept into the city with a softness neither of them had noticed in years. The grand opening of the center drew a crowd of artists, students, and families, each of them stepping into the space with wide eyes and wonder. Callie floated between rooms, guiding people through exhibits while Jacob stayed mostly in the background, watching her shine. That night, after the last guest had left, he found her sitting on a bench near the front, barefoot and tired, her dress dusted with flecks of charcoal. He sat beside her. You did it. We did it, she corrected, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the city a distant echo outside. Then Jacob stood, reached into his pocket, and got down on one knee. Callie's breath caught. I wasn't going to do this tonight, he said. But somewhere between the moment you gave that little girl a paintbrush and the way you helped that man find his son's portrait, I realized I didn't want to wait. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. I don't care what name's on the building or how many companies I run or what my bank account says. My real life started the day you stole your lunch back, and I want to spend the rest of it with you. He opened the box. Inside was a ring that didn't scream wealth, it whispered love. A single emerald-cut diamond set in a sleek band, elegant and timeless. Callie dropped her hand from her mouth. Yes, he blinked. I didn't even say you don't need to, she said, pulling him to his feet. Yes, Jacob Monroe, 1,000 times yes. They married 4 months later in the courtyard of the center they'd built together. The ceremony was intimate, surrounded by the students they'd taught, the artists they'd helped, and the city that had watched them become more than they once believed possible. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Jacob took her hand and led her to the rooftop above the hall. Lights twinkled overhead and music drifted from the string quartet below. He pulled her close. "You know what I was thinking," Callie laughed. "That you're out of ways to surprise me. Not even close," he said. "But I was wondering what would have happened if you hadn't taken back your rap that day." She looked up at him. "Then I'd still be eating alone and you'd still be pretending you liked boardrooms," he smiled. "And now," she whispered, "you've got me. Forever." And with the city lights shining around them, the man who once believed everything had a price finally learned what it meant to give everything for love. And the woman who thought she'd lost her voice found herself in the arms of someone who had never once asked her to change. Together, they built something stronger than any fortune. A life made of color, laughter, and the kind of love that never fades.